If you need a seat, we will find you one, so don't be shy, come on in. Come on in, come on in. Thanks, it's great to have this kind of turnout tonight. It's great to have this kind of turnout tonight, so thank you. So if this is your first time as the McKinley Park Development Council, especially, thank you for coming. We're really excited tonight to tell you all about our plan for a connected bicycle and pedestrian path along the south branch of the Chicago River. For those of you who heard the piece on the MPDC today, we really do hope that one day you'll be able to ride the whole way downtown, all the way to the lakefront without competing with cars. Right. There's some things that happen first, and we're going to talk about it. So let's get to it. So, right, there you go. So last year, we set out to do a couple of things. We applied for a grant from the Chicago Community Trust, and we're really grateful to them for funding this project. We set out to build a trail on the river. And part of the objectives of building that trail are to get cyclists and pedestrians off of Archer Avenue, to improve access to the Orange Line stations. And for those of you who are familiar with the Ashland Orange Line, you know it's running a gauntlet to get there. And also to improve access to the riverfront. There are parts of our riverfront that have been closed to the public for 150 years. 150 years they have been dominated by industry. And now it's our turn. Things are changing, and we want to take advantage of some momentum that's already happening to get those changes to work for the public. So when we applied for this grant, for the Our Great Rivers grant, they had a list of places on the rivers, and when they solicited applications, they said, we want people to connect these spots, we want people to improve these spots. So this map over here are the spots that our path connects. So as you can see, there are 9 of them, ranging from West all the way to Chinatown, and they include some places you probably know well, like King Tom Park, or the Damon Silos, and maybe some that you don't. Maybe you've never been to Daily Boat Launch, or you don't ride. If you don't ride, maybe you don't know the Women's Street Bridge, which is one of the few connections between here and Fulton. This was our first map. We made it on Google to show how crazy it was to try and get to all these places along the designated bike paths. So 49 minutes if you stick to bike routes, 20 some if you went straight down Archer, and this is one of the problems that we're trying to solve, because you have to choose between getting where you need to go on time and getting where you need to go safely. So in order to do this, we are taking advantage of some policies that already exist, and a lot of us can take on that.
Yeah. So, Eladio, the project manager for this one, as you read through the physical thing or you look through the online document, and as we go through the presentation, you'll see that there's a lot of things that require like big construction that are super expensive. And we're hoping that the new design guidelines for Chicago take care of a lot of that. So in 2019, the city updated the river design guidelines, and those require that anyone who buys land along the river has to, and develops it, has to create a public walking path. So it's very specific. You have to do a 30-foot setback from the edge of the river, and you have to create a 10-foot trail with gravel on the sides, specific local plants and trees, specific seating, specific lighting, and that kind of stuff has to happen. And so that'll take care of some big chunks of our project. And then we'll also talk about the pieces that have to be done by private landowners who aren't going to do that. But here's some other pieces of the river design guidelines that specify what has to go on there if you build something on the river. So like I said, 10-foot path, 2 feet of shoulder, specific trees. And so if you've been to the South Halsted Riverwalk, which is right behind the Orange Line Halsted stop, you can see an example of a bike path, a walking path that has been built to the new guidelines. So it's very pretty. If you get a chance, head down there, it's right behind the Orange Line station on Halsted. But it has seating, lighting, even a floating habitat that our friends at Urban Rivers installed there. And so this is what the rest of the Riverwalk could look like as we progress through the years. And folks don't have to do this as they buy land.
And now we'll have Heidi from Living Habitats. Living Habitats is our landscape architecture firm, and they have like done the physical work of making these amazing plans for us. And go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I have been asked by Kate and Flavio to just give a little bit of background about our firm and how we came to participate in this amazing project. Oh, yeah. I just wanted to share that since the inception of Living Habitats in 2001, we've actively promoted for an appreciation of the complex beauty of our natural environment. And we personally have an irrepressible passion for making this resource accessible and tangible in our work in the form of what we call living habitats that are designed to link people and nature. As advocates for resiliency, our designs promote sustainability and reinforce biodiversity in an ever-changing climate, elevating the importance for all of us of community connections with nature for our future well-being. To give you a flavor of the different projects that we tend to be involved in, they range in scale, and this project also demonstrates a very wide range of potential project scales that will be implemented. To give you a little highlight, they range from some of our sample project work range from local projects, the Chicago Botanic Garden, which many of you may be familiar with. We've got a 20-year relationship with that organization working to restore their 6 miles of shorelines, around 60 acres of lakes. So we have an incredible amount of experience in dealing with the terrestrial and aquatic environments and how to bring people and nature in connection together in those spaces. It's the largest garden now at the Chicago Botanic Garden, the shoreline restoration of all native species. This particular image highlights a place where we used a little bit of hardscape to terrace down from an existing bridge bulkhead to offer some additional interpretation. So many different design ideas that can be implemented out in the environment to make spaces more beautiful and accessible to the public. A little further afield, out in California, Los Angeles area, we've been involved for the last several years in the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing. This is a very large project that's promoting habitat connectivity and restoration. In this case, very specifically targeting the mountain lion and an endangered population of those that species that needed to increase connectivity and bring together habitat islands. And again, we have many different similarities of what we're experiencing here in the city where we have pockets of bright spots and we want to bring and link those things together. A little bit closer, the Discovery Partners Institute headquarters, that's going to be at the other end of this connection point. This is a large project that's being funded by the state. Capital Development Board is the client. And this is another opportunity for the public to make connections to the South Branch, as well as bringing the community closer to these natural resources that, again, have been somewhat, we turned our back to somewhat, or in some cases up to this point. A few other projects here on the bottom, South Cook County, the village of Robbins, we were involved with the master plan and a revisioning for that community to try to elevate it out of the floodplain. It currently has a lot of flooding, and we designed and re-envisioned a large wetland park that will build off of the Cal-State Channel and connect this, the village to that channel, allowing for the potential to better manage stormwater. Similar things are happening here with water quality in the lovely Freeport. So working with large organizations like the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, that would have been our client in this particular case, can really get big infrastructure projects accomplished with a vision brought to bear. At the other end of the scale, a very small project here in the Inglewood neighborhood, west side of the city, Chicago, Hammond Elementary. Currently just a concrete swath in front of this playground or in front of this school that has hardly any play space or outdoor environments, re-envisioning that small space and allowing for the community to express itself in the form of play and outdoor nature play. That's under construction this summer. And then finally, just another project that we did some community engagement. That was one of our most enjoyable parts of this project, was getting to meet so many of you, involving the community in the process, hearing what was important and trying to communicate that and articulate it in the plan. At Edgar's Grove, the Forest Reserves of the county was our client. And in that case, they were looking to re-engage their local residents that were around this preserve that didn't really know too much about it. And they wanted to invite them in and create a warmer setting we had a lot of outreach over a year and a half to hear and understand what they needed to do from a setback standpoint. So with that, I'm gonna also turn and just mention that we've just been so pleased to be a part of this project, and I really look forward to continuing to work with all of you into the future as we apply all of our skills and knowledge of the community with you to help execute this plan for the future.
Okay. Now let's just, take a minute to say thank you to, Heidi and Jolly. Oh, it's been a year. I know, it's really weird. And a lot has happened this year. We're very excited about it. So let's see what they did, all right? All right, so as somebody mentioned when they walked in the door, I opened up this plan and I didn't know it was 90 pages. It's not, we're not obviously gonna cover all of that, you know, before the library staff wants to go on. So on that note, we are giving an overview. Certainly ask you, we invite you to spend more time. The links to the plan, the digital copies of the plan are posted on our website, on Facebook page. And there's also some QR codes circulating around where you can sign a letter of support asking city and state officials, county and state officials to help us implement this plan. In there's also a link. So any way you want to cheat, we invite you to do so. We're glad you're here. It is long, so I think I'll take questions maybe at the end of each section. If you have like a clarification, like, hey, I didn't get it, go ahead and ask that. But if you have like a bigger picture question, I'll ask you to hold it to the end. Okay. All right. So this is the South Branch Connectivity Project Framework Plan. And could not have done this without our partners. So Coalition for Better Chinese American Community, Bridgeport Alliance, Living Habitats, Open Lands in Lee's here, Open Lands and Chicago Community Trust. We're really grateful for all that. We also have a few friends here from some of our elected officials. Thank you, Teresa, and friends of the Chicago River, who've also been a great friend here. Christine. So all of you are in the acknowledgements. So this is that for another. All right. So, yeah. So the introduction. So why do we do this? Well, we kind of talked a bit about why we did this in the introduction, right? We see in the ABC an opportunity, and we want to take advantage of that opportunity to open the riverfront to the public and to improve traffic safety and access to public transportation. So this is the area that we're looking at, and you see it's a lot bigger than just the river, right? We're not just like, we are looking at how you move along the river, but also how you would get to the river and how you would use a riverfront path to get other places. So while the path, you know, runs here on the south bank, and physically goes through McKinley Park, Bridgeport, and Chinatown, that's not the only neighborhoods that it impacts, right? Obviously, if you live in Pilsen or Little Village and you want to come down to catch a train on Western, Bridgeport, or on Ashland, that impacts you too. So I want to point out that while it goes through 3 neighborhoods, it directly impacts at least 6. So some things that came out as like a little bit more boiled up goals in the final version of the plan here are to provide a continuous multi-use trail, right? From Richard J. Daley Boat Launch, which is the park just on the western side of Western, on the mythical land of Western Avenue that most people don't know is there. All the way to Pigtown Park in Chinatown. And so this names out specific sections of the park that we need to look like, calls out the fact that the Prologis section near Halstead is already there. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things we want to do there is to improve safety, mobility, and accessibility for cyclists along the South Branch and adjacent areas. So I also want to call out here that we are also calling for improvements to Archer Avenue, which I think several people have already asked about tonight. Yes, of course, we want bike lanes on Archer Avenue. This isn't meant to be an either or, but you know, given the way that the state is moving with the parts of Archer that they control, we might actually get this first if we're So we'd like to have both. We'd like to have the place you can take your kid for a bike ride and the place that you might want to hurry up and get to work, and that's not usually the case. A couple other things here, improving access to Pingtom Park from 18th Street is also important. One of the ironies of that situation, Pingtom Park exists because nobody wanted that property because she can't get to it, and that's how they got the land for the park. However, now that the park exists, everyone wants to get there, right? And so on the one hand, I want to point this out, is actually, this is one of the things that we're hoping to do with other parts of the project, is to create demand, and then to get, to build that impetus, so we can say, no, really, like, we need this piece of infrastructure so that people can get to this location. And of course, we would also like to help our neighbors in Chinatown get access to their park, for more than just a single entry where you have to cross light river. So connect neighborhoods, right? Arbor Square, Chinatown, Bridgeport, Brighton Park, La Villita, McKinley Park, and Pilsen, to the south branch of the river and to more of the city. One of the things that's interesting here is, so we are looking at getting to Ping Tom Park. On the other side of the Ping Tom Park, they're planning the 78. On the other side of the 78, they're planning an expansion of the downtown Riverwalk. So probably at least 10 years from now, but in the future, when all of those things actually happen, you could be able to start here in McKinley Park and get all the way to the lakefront via the downtown Riverwalk and not compete with parks. So that's the long-term goal. We're going to focus on the things that we can do a little closer to home together. Create a cohesive sense of place along the South Branch. So you guys know that, like, right now we have mostly heavy industry on the riverfront, and it's kind of a jumble of things that doesn't all go together. But we want to get to where there's a unified sense of place, and we can do that with the green space that will be created as each of these properties is redeveloped. Expand, improve, and activate public space along the South Branch. People do want to get to the river and have fun. We've seen a lot more activity, for example, at Parks 571, starting with the kayak program last summer, which has been incredibly popular. Went down there the first day this year, and they were already sold out for the first month of June. We want to encourage improvement of environmental conditions on the river. So also doing this will require planting native plants, for example, and will help to restore riparian habitats for all the things that live in the river. Some of you were here for a talk from the Shed a couple of months ago, where they talked about how surprised they were to find out that there are more distinct species of fish on the South Branch than the North Branch now. So hopefully that means we're doing something right. And finally, provide equitable access to the riverfront for all neighborhood residents. We do want to do this in a way that is inclusive to everyone, and that means both socially, economically, in terms of maintaining diversity of the neighborhoods that we live in. And that is going to require some careful balancing, for example. One of our ideas here, for example, to include opportunities for job training in the process of building these things to develop and help people build skills, as well as to establish a land trust, both for affordable housing and also for green space. All right. So community engagement, quite a few of you, I think, were here for this event. It took us a while. Overall, we had over 600 neighbors who participated in community engagement events, whether you came here for a talk, or you attended one of the focus groups with UIC, or one of the small events. So we had about 100 surveys. We had 200 participants, really 250 participants at some of those events. And then again, more people for our lecture series that has come along with this. And I want to get down to, where we actually landed on it. So things that are important. People want low stress biking and pedestrian network, right? People value existing parks and they want to use the riverfront to create additional recreational space. Including active and passive recreation. When we say active recreation, that's things like playgrounds and sports fields. When we say passive recreation, that's more like running or biking or fishing. People want a real sense of place to use some of the industrial relics and maintain them that we have, to kind of keep the vibe of like, hey, there's something here, this is part of something, this thing has a history, but at the same time to also move forward. And also to have, in the long run, some interpretive signage to kind of explain things that happened. Like, for example, why was Bridgeport an Irish neighborhood? Because they came here to dig the canals. What about the Native American trails that became Archer Avenue? Yeah, so things like that about our history, how different groups of immigrants have come in and out of here, and how that shapes the city as we know it today and how that shapes our neighborhood. So we do want to honor all of that and the things that go on with that in the future. That also feeds into arts and cultural community gatherings. One of the most cited places people want to get to is the Museum of Mexican American Art, which is interesting in Pilsen. So we are looking at, like, there's a lot of things that people want to be able to get to, and they range from Mariano's, because that can also be very difficult on foot, trying to get around Bubbly Creek, Mariano's or Yale, or getting to work, but also cultural assets, like, you know, museums and other community gatherings. All right, environmental and sustainability goals. People certainly want to see continued environmental cleanup. We do have Superfund sites on this path, and that is one of the reasons that development will take a while. We do also know, and we'll get to it in a little bit, that like one of them is projected to get cleaned up this year. So things are moving at the speed of government, but they are moving. And finally, equity, inclusion, and housing. Obviously, everybody here, a lot of people have complained in McKinley Park because it's a reasonably affordable place to live compared to other parts of the city, and we have to do that. That also feeds into land use and zoning policy. You know, on the one hand, a lot of you and a lot of us have been very involved in trying to keep new heavy industry out of here. Doing that in the long run does mean changing land use and zoning policy. And so that's also something that takes a while, but it's all part of this plan. Also note here, there's also interest in creating like smaller economic opportunities, homegrown things like festivals and markets, and those community events. So things like, for example, some of you might have been to the Mercadito at the community play garden. So looking for pop-up things like that, places for cottages with free small vendors, home businesses. Question on community engagement. I mean, you're here, right? So you're doing your part. Right. So existing conditions. So there's a lot of stuff on and around the riverfront, right? And varying conditions and varying shapes and sizes. So for purposes of the plan, we've split it up into 3 sections. Western to Damon, Damon to Halsted, and Halsted to King Tom. And you'll see why that's important in a minute here, and how drastically different the conditions are in those 3 sections. So here is Western to Damon. So in many ways, this is going to be the hardest part to implement. Unless you've seen it from the water, you probably have not seen the river edge at this location. So specifically, all of this right here is a natural river edge, which is a great opportunity. It's the only section of our path that is still a natural river edge, heavily forested. It's beautiful. But that also makes it inaccessible, right? So what will happen with those sections really depends on what comes next. So the first law we want to talk about here, so Western Avenue Bridge, some of you might have attended the meeting a while back. The Western Avenue Bridge is supposed to be renovated, shored up, I suppose you could say, in the not terribly distant future. CDOT has published drawings that do include bike lanes on the bridge, but nothing for getting on and off the bridge and nothing to connect to at the foot of the bridge. And so there is still a condition where you literally cannot safely cross Western on foot between Blue Island and about 34th, 35th. So that's something that we would like to remedy and have a way to get around, to get across Western, because nobody needs to be running across those giant concrete pillars to get from one side to the other. This property here, SageNet, was an internet company. That lot is currently listed for sale. So what happens next with it depends on the buyer and what they want to do. If they say, we want to use the office building the way it is, then nothing changes and we'll go negotiate with them to talk about building a path, maybe in a collaborative way. If somebody comes in and wants to renovate and do something new on the lot, then what Elia talked about earlier with the required path as part of the development process will apply. The next lot here is really the big X factor. It's owned by Vienna South Railroad and, it's mostly empty and they're not very cooperative. So we will see what we can do there. It's lovely forested lot. You can see it from Dana a little bit on the, if you're on 29th Street in front of the silos, you can kind of see it from there. The Damon silos, you guys are pretty well informed, I think, on that topic. We spent a lot of time on it. What I want you to know here, though, is that whatever happens next with the silos, when it gets redeveloped, the owners will be required to add public access. And so, that's the irony of the whole thing. They say they want to demolish it to keep people out, but when they build something new, they will in fact be required to build a lakefront, riverfront path, just like everyone else on the river. And in fact, the county, has suggested that we look at building a bridge from the Damon silos to the adjoining park, over the Santa Fe slip to connect that future path to the existing path at Canal Port Riverwalk. So for those of you who came out and got rained on at Canal Port Riverwalk this week, maybe you saw that in person. It's like, it's right there, it's right there. So hopefully it's going to be a lot of the bridge. So that's the first section. And I think getting from Western to Damon, not including silos, is probably the part that's going to take the longest. Questions on this slide? So next, get this in. All right, great. So the next section we're going to pick up, so Canal Port Riverwalk. I want you guys to know that there's a coming change here to this lot. The existing owners want to build a new building on their lot. And the initial plans seem reasonable. They're not going to be changing the lot lines. It won't directly affect the park. But one of the things that we're hoping to work with them on is getting some better signage into Canal Port Riverwalk. When Eladio and I went to the meeting with them, one of the first things they said is that, there's this park across the street and it's really nice, but you can't get there. Talking about canal origins. So we are cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to work with them to improve that situation since they seem to want to use it for themselves and their employees. All right. So they'll be great. So a lot of people seem to be very excited about this idea of a bridge across Bubble Creek. If that QR code comes around to you, that is one of the things we are asking our government agencies to prioritize. Because we do think that's one of the highest impact items on our list here in the plan. It affects so many things. It affects getting between green spaces. It affects getting to the L. It affects basic transportation and again, safety crossing Ashland. Where you can, instead of going all the way down and around and having to use Archer and that awful staircase into the L, you could instead take a bridge with no cars. So it's, we plan here asking you to see that, to prioritize that, and we ask you to help us ask them to prioritize that. The next lot here is owned by People's Gas. So this lot right here is currently owned by People's Gas, and they are planning to remediate it in the next year. It's a super fun site. It used to be, this lot and Park 571 used to be one lot. And in the long run, we would like to reunite them and expand the park. When you stand in Park 571, you might have noticed that there's a sidewalk that goes all the way to the fence, like it was going to continue onto that lot, and it just stops. Somebody else thought about this too. It's already built into the infrastructure. And so that's one of the things we think that might be possible in the next few years is to acquire that lot for public use. This lot here, next one is Brandenburg, also a super fun site. Brandenburg is a major industrial operator. They have moved all of their equipment and personnel out. And so we assume that they will sell, but we haven't had anything official yet. That's nearly a half mile of basically parking lot on the riverfront. So it's hard to imagine that anyone who would spend what that's worth today would want to leave a new parking lot. So we are pretty sure that that will get developed eventually and that new owner will have to check it over. And that brings us to ComEd. So this stretch right here is a ComEd substation. And while ComEd is not going anywhere, so they will not be required to build anything under riverfront design, the river design guidelines, The river design guidelines require 10 feet of pavement and 2 feet of gravel on either side, so 14 feet, right? ComEd has 16 feet of gravel, and it's basically flat. So we are literally asking them to take down a chain link fence and pave it, or help us figure out how to pave it together. So we're not asking for a whole lot from them, and certainly we appreciate, support there to for them to make that change. And then on this property here, the Canadian National Railway is a particularly interesting one. When you come up, so right now, you cross Archer and there's a wall, it's about, I'm sorry, not Archer, you cross Halsted from the Crowley to Riverwalk. So there's Brandenburg, there's ComEd, and then this is the existing section of Riverwalk behind the Halsted Hill. So I get you all the way to Halsted Street. This next lot right here, what most people would do here, the way it's designed now, you would have to come down to Archer and get on Archer. But there's a dirt track here owned by the railroad. And the only obstacle to getting on it is a concrete wall that's about yay high. So we are presently negotiating with the railroad to see if we can get access for that. It would also be in their interest, for obvious reasons, they wouldn't want other cars in there. But to have, street level access to their tracks and to have paved access to their tracks will be in their interest. So we're hoping that we can work something out there. No, not having it. All right. Okay. So, so this is that same section that's one of the yellow that I just talked about, help you get oriented. What happens after that is really interesting. You might have never noticed Grove Street, but it's about to become a lot more important to Chinatown. So on the corner right here, so here's give you Wilson's Place, here's Marketplace 88, Chinatown Square is this way. Right here, Canal, I'm sorry, Cermak Canal and the river is a historic building that's about to be renovated into a hotel and Asian lifestyle center. And all of their traffic is going to come onto Grove Street. So this is Grove Street here. Grove Street is only paved to about here, and the rest of it's dirt. But it exists already. So we are asking the railroad to help us with their section, unpaved, but it's there, to connect to what's called this little sliver of IDOT and the rest of it's CDOT. We're just asking them to pave an existing street and open it to bicycles. And that will connect to this, this new property, the Pacific Development, which has streetscaping as part of its development plan, and so the developer will be required to do their section there. We're working with them and with DPD, and we got the initial plans. They had plans for 100 bike racks, but no, we're like, come on, guys. Like, somebody think about the rest of this, right? Chinatown is one of the highest percentage of cyclists in Chicago because it's small, it's compact, a lot of people don't drive for whatever reason. Chinatown also has 10% of the population of Chinatown is over 85. And amazingly, those people mostly walk for transportation, and a lot of them are on bikes, which is remarkable. It's probably how they got to be 85. We really, want to support that kind of lifestyle and be like, hey, come on, we can have some better infrastructure here for these people who are the target audience for an Asian lifestyle center, which is going to include a grocery store and hotels and I think spa and a few other things. So that's going to be an interesting development, and it's also really exciting that they're not touching the exterior of the building at all. They're going to leave them intact. And it's really nice to see a developer come in and actually honor the history of the thing that way, and try to improve it in a way. So Pearl Street here, this lot right here is owned by the city. And we project, they plan to sell it later this year. And they have said that anything that they allow to come in will comply with this plan. So, and will also be required to build river access. So we're excited about that. And then finally, this last stretch to King Kong is kind of a hard part. There's a couple of different ways that might happen, but some of you most of you are probably familiar with the bridge at the end of King Tom Park. That every time you told somebody new about this project, especially people who are in the business, the engineers or planners are like, oh man, that bridge, how are you gonna get around that bridge? So we have a couple ideas and I'm gonna share them with you in a minute, but, it is in many ways the biggest engineering challenge that we will have. You know, we have some of the things that we have to get around are engineering challenges, some are social challenges, some are just dealing with an owner. But as far as engineering, it's not kind of complicated, because if you go under that bridge, you can't go over it, it's 4 stories tall, that's not realistic. You can't go around it because there are many railroad tracks and they cross and go between each other. And if you go under it, I am 5'2", and sitting on my kayak, I can reach up my paddle and hit the bottom, and the water's not that high. So there's a few things going on there, but yes, my questions about any of this and the existing conditions? All right, so we're gonna fast forward a bit here. To talk a little bit about what's next. You might recognize that this is Google Foods, just north of the Ashland Road line. All right, so here, the dark green lines are the recommended path. The bright green lines are the sections that are already here. So most of those are Chicago Park District properties. So for example, now Fort River Walk, now Origins Park, Park 571. The exceptions here are Google Foods on Holy Creek. And Carlo just also knows the Halsted River Walk behind the Halsted. So the basic idea here, is it, there's a couple places that you have to go under things. So these water drops symbolize places where we would have to go under the bridge, for example. So the Western Bridge, where there's really no way to cross it, and even though CDOT has plans to fix the bridge itself, they're not fixing the system around the bridge. So we would look at some kind of floating boardwalk under it. And so people have cited the Wild Mile as an example, and it might look kind of like that, but I want to point out that the support system on the Wild Mile is inadequate, provides that there are other examples of ways to do it that are more stable. So just in case anybody, had that thought, there are ways to make it more stable, and we're looking at those. The other spot where we may have to go under is up here. Under the bridge that walks on King Tom, that's one option. That's one option. Realistically, in the short term, we'll probably be looking at access across 18th Street there on existing bike lanes, but in the long run. This is the only space where we have like a plan A and a plan B. So in this section, so we talked about Grove Street, there's a little bit where you can go on land and you have to negotiate with Allied Metal. There used to be a CDOT street there. The street is still there, but now it's fenced up into Allied property, and they paid for it. It's not like they did something they were supposed to do. That's one option, is to work with them. The other option is to go into water, and that would mean there are existing docks behind Lawrence Fisheries and in the marina next to canal. And so we would have to negotiate with those owners to come up with some sort of solution for the docks that works for them, for their water operations, and would work for new traffic. When we initially spoke to Lawrence Fisheries, they were open to it. They're like, hey, more foot traffic means we sell more fish. And they're okay with that. And the marina is a little bit different because it's strictly a commercial operation. So I think it's excitement back there. That's okay, that's good, that's good. All right. So basically, sorry, so before I do that slide, I just want to point out that basically everything that we are showing here, other than those, with those couple of exceptions where we have to go under existing infrastructure, the rest of this basically just follows the shoreline and all the lot by lot that I just talked you through. Just follows the shoreline for each owner and connects them. And that sounds really obvious, right? But if you've noticed, but this requirement exists downtown and it's not connected. And so part of the reason for having a coherent plan is to make sure, when it was conceived, it was strictly people should be able to see the water. But nobody thought about, we should use this for transportation. And so this is actually a new idea in terms of a planning strategy to point out that all of these things should actually be connected to each other, because it's not just a destination on the water, it's also a way to get around. And a way to experience the whole waterfront and not just one line. All right, so this is planning, this is what we really like to do, and over time, we are confident that certainly from Damon to Halsted is gonna happen. Those lots are turning over, and as each one turns over, there's other section. It's the ends where we're gonna have to negotiate. We're gonna have to negotiate from Damon to Western, where there's a lot of vacant space. It's a wooded, lovely. If you have the opportunity to see it from the water, I'd encourage you to do so. And then from Halsted to King Tom, where you just have a lot more artifacts. There's just a lot of stuff that's already there. And we can't go all the way up to the riverfront because those buildings literally have their fire escapes in the water. So there's no way to put lights on, so we have to come onto the street instead. Good news is there's a street, it's not very good, so we're hoping to capture that advice. So in the interim, we did look at how can you get from A to B, some of these places, on existing streets. So for example, and because of one-ways, because of the way that I-55 cuts things off, that's pretty difficult from Bubbly Creek from Bridgeport and Echelon Park. There really isn't a good way to do it. If you wanted to connect there is not a through street from Ashland to Damon, for example, that gets you to the riverfront. It's blocked off by I-55 and by railroad tracks. It's just not there. And likewise, if you can't get across the water, then you're gonna have to come down Archer. And so, as someone we're not gonna come in, we're finally gonna get bike lanes on Archer. Yes, but not here, not yet. So we have to keep working on that. Every little piece helps, every little piece helps. But to get here, yeah, you would have to come down to 33rd Street and then you still have to duck around to 34th to be able to cross to the last leg of Western Avenue and actually get up here. So that's not a great solution, but it's what exists today. So we did want to point out, like, this is the safest, most efficacious path available right now. And then the other route here is a little bit different. So again, up to Halsted, we're pretty confident we'll get all of this, and then Grove Avenue seems very realistic. This last leg is going to take some doing, and so at least in the short term, we'll probably direct cyclists onto Canal Street, where there's an existing bike lane, mostly, and 18th Street, which has an existing bike lane. But this right here makes the demand for access to King Tom Park from 18th Street even more important. People already want that because there's only entrance to King Tom. You have to go all the way up and around and back in and cross the railroad track. So access from 18th Street would really open up that park in a lot of ways. And in a little bit, we'll show you some drawings of how we can do that. Before we get to specific sites, I also just want to talk about the bike. So, just want to talk about the vibe. So these are some examples. These are real life examples from other places of ways that we could do this. So things that, where they've taken up old ironworks or old building materials and given them new life in a new place. Examples of signage, examples of monuments. Green spaces, one of the things we found out in community engagement is people really want green spaces that look natural. Like manicured is nice, but people want to feel like they're out in the country, and that's great, and that's realistic. And also people want, public spaces, activation places to hang out. Things that are not overly structured for any particular event, could be this flexible for different kinds of events, or whether that's something that could be like a small, a picnic gathering or a place to have a birthday party or a small music venue, what have you, like it's flexible spaces for many different kinds of events. And I also want to point this out too, is we're looking especially at the Ashland L station and how like dark and difficult to see it is in there. Look at some ways you can brighten something up with maybe some paint and lighting. Like it doesn't take a lot to make something better. So also thinking about those opportunities for public art. So these are the sections we just went over. Depending on each lot. That's about Western. These are some examples too for like for placemaking, so really want to think about that. We have some very unique places on the road front, like in silos or even Park 571, you know, the building itself is really eye-catching, but how do you build things around it that give it a vibe that are still useful? And so thinking about use of materials, and you know, how do you make this more functional? So these are, for example, some examples of footbridges, and you might see something like that crossing from the Damon silos to Fort River Walk in the future. And color. Okay, so 29th Street, which is the road that goes from Ashland to that giant on-ramp up to the Damon overpass, you know, the big scary one that's always full of trucks. Right, okay. So also not great for cycling, right? But like if you worked at FedEx, you might be doing that. So things to think about brightening that up also with some color and like a little bit of space. I did notice when we were out there last weekend, they moved a bunch of these around to kind of sort of create a bike lane. It's something. And then Bubbly Creek. Here's one way we could finally have this bridge over Bubbly Creek. I love this drawing, the level of detail where they also put in the kayakers and the floating islands and more floating islands than we have now. And our beautiful view of the skyline. Here's some other examples of what those bridges can look like. And more bridges and ways to connect parks, We currently have 6 parks on the waterfront and they're all chopped up. So how do we put these things back together and make them coherent? So this is also a vision of how we could do ComEd. So right now, the existing Villages River Walk is right here. And so we really are just looking to continue things straight on the same way. When we pitched ComEd for this idea, we did show them these drawings and also some other ideas and things to be done with their security fence. They have to have the security fence. That's, you know, nobody needs to get electrocuted. But it doesn't have to be ugly, you know, and that could be a really interesting way to get some, get something again, placemaking and get some community art projects. That section here, I should have shown you this in the larger print. It's a little easier to see, but this is what I was talking about earlier, where this section we have an option A and an option B. And option A where we go on the water to cross to King Tom, and option B where we negotiate with the landholder to go across their property to the bridge. And we'll see how that plays out. Color. You just really like color. That's also one of the things that we find out. Yeah, well, I mean, we have a lot of murals around here. And it goes with the culture, right? It goes with all of the cultures that live here. Like people like bright colors and we love our murals. These are some ideas of like things that could be done at the 9094 underpass, which is right where the railroad access road meets the end of Grove Street is under I-94. So I thought this is a really interesting example of how to brighten up a space like that and make it a little more inviting. These are also some examples of how we can get through that concrete knee wall at Halstead. These are like a little bit dug out. And how you can get through space like that. In pictures. Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community has actually done some design work on how to revitalize viaducts in Chinatown with some paint and lighting and other art projects. So we're excited to see what they come up with. We're going to get a pilot on 26th Street, I believe it is. I think in the next year, you might know more than I do. No, okay. But we're looking at all the viaducts. One of the things that would be nice to do here too is there are 3 viaducts between Archer and Grove. Right now, only one of them is open. if they were all open, it would be a lot easier for people to escape Archer. So that's also something we look at, and also breaking them up. If you've ever walked or biked to Park 571 and you go under that bridge, where you have to go under the interstate, and then you have to go under the railroad, and it's dark and wet, you get dripped on. We'd like to do something about that. And then finally, you know, things that could happen around Utah Park. So this is right from our very own Riverwalk. This shelter is actually there to keep you from getting, particles on you when the bridge lifts. It's a shield. But you know, we have examples of things like this right here in our own city that we could do in other places to facilitate getting under that bridge safely. These are also some ideas for how you can get from East Street to King Tom. And again, like this is an example from the 606 right here in Chicago. You have a spiral, it doesn't take up a lot of space, geographically speaking, to get down from the trail onto the street. In that case, we could use something like that to get to the park. Or, you know, here's the Texas size version from Austin. So, I'm gonna wrap it up here because I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I do want to point out that we did not just look at what's on the river, we also looked at connecting to the river. And so these are some areas of opportunities with especially key intersections that need improvement. And that includes most major intersections along Archer as well as other areas like Western and Ashland. And you can read the full list for yourself and very own digital copy. But I also want to point out bike lanes on major streets, right? Because it's not just, if we're using it for transportation, people have to get to the river to use it for transportation, and all of those things also need to be safer. So the pink zones here are areas of priority for bicycle and pedestrian access. And one of the things I specifically want to point out is this right here. The idea of not just a pedestrian bridge up here between the two parks, but also a pedestrian bridge behind the Marianos. Possibly connecting it to the projected castle development. Chinese American Service League is building a new community center and senior housing right off of Archer, and that gives us a great opportunity. Again, they're bringing in a lot of senior citizens. We need to use public transit. That's another, gives us a little more emphasis to say, hey, this really needs to be safer. And all those people got to get to the grocery store. So we'd like to make that easier by having another bridge further down here as well. And we'll see how that goes. I think this is a good time to stop. There's lots of pretty pictures of ways it could be, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to take questions. And the library staff is gonna, by a quarter till, they're gonna start pushing this. So what would you like to know? Yeah.
Great, this is awesome. I heard a lot of talk about going into the river and taking on the river. So two questions. Have you engaged with Park District about getting some of those vacant lots? Or lots
Park
of-
District and Army Corps.
Yes. Please, my second question. That channel, I think, is all federally authorized as a national channel, which I think should take congressional action to be authorized and put some legal water. Have you engaged with any of those offices?
Yeah, we had an initial conversation with Army Corps, and it appears that if we are between the land and the pillars of the bridge, we're not gonna put a ship, there's a way around that issue.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just how?
No, that's fair. That's fair, and a very reasonable question. In fact, one of the other things we learned is that for some of the stuff on Lovely Creek, it's actually not Army Corps that has jurisdiction, Coast Guard, because it's not national. So that also gets interesting. But, yes, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, I might have missed this, but, sorry, who are you and what is your involvement with this project?
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm the president of the McKinley Park Development Council, and we are the group leading this effort.
Okay, great, you're doing a great job.
Who's next? You guys are shy tonight, come on, I talked about some of that stuff. All right.
Do you have plans for getting onto and off some of the bridges that you're passing under? Having more moves up to Turn Avenue.
Yeah,
Crossing, but
No, that's fair, yeah, so we do wanna make the tightest connection possible around the bridge for the reasons that John cited, that there's a lot of regulation there. And so the smaller, footprint you leave in the water, the more likely you are to get approved. So that's definitely a consideration, and so with something like Western, so there's actually a footpath on either side of that bridge where people have kind of beat it for themselves, and that's probably where it will go to hug the roadway pretty tightly. Because some people are actually gonna be going to park and some people are gonna be passing through, so again, we want to keep it as close to the shortest route as we can get doing it that way.
Do you engage with any high school advocacy groups, like NL or student bands, those kind of groups to kind of put pressure on these?
We would love your help with that. We have had a preview conversation with the bike team at CDOT and also with, Southwest Collective Season Plan and Active Transit. So we got to start, but like, if you guys want in on this, let's talk. More the merrier. In fact, one of the things I want to ask you guys tonight before I lose track of it is, we would like to have some engagement events, some opportunities for people to come out and see all of this summer. And one of the ways we're thinking of doing that is with a bike ride. And so, actually, let's just go ahead and ask that question now. So we had a couple of options for how people might want to see more of this if you'd like to see it in person. Would you be interested in a bike ride? Okay. All right. Would you be interested in a walk? Keep in mind, it's, the shorter version of the walk is probably just 2 miles. Okay. Yeah. Would you be interested in seeing it in the water if we could get things to paddle? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, that's really good. So we kind of wanted to see what people might be into and engage that, but those are the kind of events I think we'd like to have this summer, to get people outside and engage more. Actually, while I'm on that note, speaking of engagement, we are also, moving forward to the next steps of our project with the National Park Service. We won a competitive process, to have technical assistance from them for at least the next year. And the things we're gonna be working with them on are wayfinding. So like, how do I get my around on the river? What kind of signage do we need? Where should it go? What are the important places to get to and from? Also to get wayfinding to get people between the river and neighborhood points of interest. So that again, it would be everything from, Mariano's to 18th Street to 35th Street to Chinatown Square. How do you get between all those places? So thinking about it as transportation on the river and also transportation to and from the river. Multicultural programming to bring people out to the river. We really, really want to activate these spaces because the more people get out and use them, the easier it is to say, hey, like, we need this space, right? So we want to encourage everybody to get out and use these spaces, and make sure that people know that, for example, that all of the existing parks and riverwalk sections are here and that they are open to the public. I know that there's been a lot of confusion about some of those sections, like, is this for us? Is this really public access? So we want to assure people that it is. It is, and that it should be. So get out there and go outside and play. Yes.
Hi, I'm Maria. I live here in the neighborhood. I have first an offering,
Oh, okay.
which is, I have flyers if anybody wants one. But a couple other art organizers and I, one of us lives in Tinley Park, one of us lives in, 2 of us live in Tinley Park, one is in Little Village. We're doing an event a month from tomorrow, which we're calling Mobile Meditation, the Creative Community Bike Tour, which will go from Chicago Art Department, honestly, through a lot of the different spots you're identifying, and then kind of back up and there. And we'll, anyway, feature like local writers who, wrote things inspired by many of these spots. So I have flyers for people to that. Which is just flyers came out, and I was like, I don't know why I didn't think to. The flyers are fine.
Send us a flyer, and we'll distribute that, help you distribute.
My question, this is like a really big question, but,
Okay.
I haven't been following the process of you all doing that like super closely. And then I haven't gone through the report yet, so those are my caveats. I feel like Maria, go to page 11, fine. I guess, like, especially moving forward, what happened? So is it like MPDC, or MPDC and the other partners you kind of started with are like basically holding or like coordinating this process, like once, so that's kind of a question, like, once this kind of gets rolling, you know, and it's like hiring like design build firms or construction groups or issuing call for artists, like, do those kinds of things, like, does MPDC decide who those are? Does that go under like city requirements for like, kind of like we and like minority owned businesses, women owned businesses, like those different designations, local hiring, like who kind of makes those kinds of determinations, like kind of like through the implementation process and like who is actually like getting engaged? That part, like, I don't know,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
this
a
is
fabulous
like,
question.
like a really high level looking forward.
No, that's a fabulous question. Thank you for asking that. I don't have a single answer to give you, which is probably a good thing, because a lot of people will make decisions, and that is because this path is gonna happen one lot at a time. And so depending on the situation with the lot, the decision makers will be different. So, you know, for example, with, with a commercial lot that is sold or that is being developed, obviously the developer is gonna have a lot to do with that. So then our role as a BDC is first off to make sure neighbors know that's happening. And to say, hey, here's when the public meeting is, here's how you can get involved. Here are some things you need to tell people, tell people what you want. We do our best to get in front of those things when we get proper notice. We do our best to get in front of those things and say, hey, have you seen our neighborhood plan? Hey, have you seen this planning document? Also, DPD, and CDOT and all the relevant city departments have seen this document. DPD has been very agreeable. CDOT's gonna take a little longer to get them in the group of things, but we're trying. And so, one of the ways, this may not be obvious, but one of the ways that neighbors have influence is actually by contributing to a document like this, which almost 600 of our neighbors did. Because it's easier to get the document in there than it is to get 600 people all at once to say something. And so that may not be obvious, but that's actually part of why these things matter. So are we gonna be the decision makers for any of this? We'll have input, we'll have influence, but I don't think that anything is gonna be entirely up to us. And the only reason I'm hedging is that there is that lot that mentioned that, we would like to set up a land trust to buy, but even so, we would have a community input process for saying, hey, neighbors, like, we have this opportunity, what do you wanna do with it? So does that answer your question?
I know it's a huge question, and some people have different questions, so I will say for now that's helpful, but I think, yeah, just thinking about like, who is being invested in, like basically what upfront, like, could happen,
Yeah,
so that, yeah, like just thinking about like who gets invested in, who doesn't get displaced, like, kind of like all of those things, and like thinking about like what can be done upfront to mitigate or minimize.
no, I think the other thing you're pointing to that's really, really important is, I know, like, especially if you live next to one of those riverfront lots that's currently empty, it's easy to think, oh, I don't want anything to change. And people have said that, and I don't blame them. I mean, you're cozy in your home and you're used to it the way it is. But the thing that you have to think about is that lot is privately held. That owner can sell at any time, and it's a private property sale, and you may not have any say in it. So again, like, participating in some of these more public processes is actually a way that you can socialize the idea that it's not okay for just anybody to buy that lot and do whatever they want with it. Right, and so, so that's actually really important, is for people to realize that for better or worse, there's some things that we'd like to stay the same, but on the other hand, we may not have that option, and so instead, we need to pick our partners, and we need to advocate as neighbors to bring in the things that we do want, so that we don't get stuck with things that we don't want.
So there's so much positive momentum around this, and so many people are asking about like how to get involved and stay involved, and to that point, I want to make sure everyone signs in that hasn't signed in because I think the best way to remain part of the process in general is to just like be aware of these future events that are happening. When there is an opportunity to develop something, you know, there's going to be a meeting about it. There's going to be additional opportunities for input. I'm wondering, you know, Kate, in addition to people staying informed and signing this letter of support, are there any big next steps or like anything that people should be aware of how they can participate? Because we keep hearing people say like, oh, this is amazing. I really want this to happen. What can I do to help?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our list here of things that you can do to help. We do want to have riverfront tours this summer. We'd love you to bring our friends, because one of the things about an idea is that it doesn't help if no one knows about it. So the more people that you can tell about this is happening, you can pass that QR code around, ask other people to sign. You can also bring a friend to the riverfront or take a friend to a riverfront park. I mean, it sounds really silly, but a lot of people don't know about the green spaces that we have. And getting out and activating those spaces and using them is advertising. It sounds really silly, but when we're like, we need more green space and we want it out here, the more people get out and use the spaces we have, the easier it is for us to say, hey, we need more green space. We should have access to the river because people use it so clearly they want it. And it sounds overly simplistic, but it's true. So that's one of the things we're asking you to do. There are going to be additional public meetings. We'll do our best to make sure that neighbors know about them in a timely fashion. Sometimes that is dependent on us finding out about them in a timely fashion, but there are going to be probably some more meetings late summer or late fall, I think, on the Damon silos. That process continues with demolition permit. QTS on the riverfront is probably going to have a public meeting in the next couple of months. That's the data center at Ashland in the river. They want to build a new building on their existing lot. And the building itself, it's not going to change the footprint of the lot or anything. It won't directly affect the park, but it could, for example, create some new opportunities for public art and also some opportunities for better signage and for improving the path into the parks that they are right next to. So there could be some community good to come out of that. So just stay engaged with those things. And I know a lot of this sounds small because it's like, here's a big idea. People want to go out and do big things. But the reality is, it's those little things day by day that really add up and make it happen. So yeah, if you are interested in volunteering with us, for example, to help guide tours this summer too, we'd also really love to know about that.
I wanted to add to Mariah's question.
Yeah.
The full plan has info on each parcel of land, who owns it, who would be key players in redeveloping it, and our suggestions for what would happen on it. So it's 90 pages of information that,
Pretty pictures.
about there.
I think we have time for one more. I'm kind of surprised the library staff is the puzzling is good, so, but thank you so much. Anybody else? Yeah.
Who will operate the right of way for maintenance in the future?
The river design guidelines require that the property owner maintain it, so the South Boston Riverwalk. The logistic company called for Logis, so they're required to keep it up. But our plans, our wishes are that we would create some kind of organization to take care of all of it. We could have a situation where one place takes care of it, the next one not so much. And since there are no requirements to connect it, part of our plan in the document is to create some kind of organization to help take care of all of it.
And we literally had a meeting yesterday with the city departments about that, where actually they were like, hey, we should do this for the whole riverfront. We were like, really? Because we were already thinking about it. We don't want to do it by ourselves and we don't have to. So hopefully we can get some muscle behind it. And we'll see.
So how will the conversations happen? It sounds like MPDC should stay involved in implementing it, but yeah, right, so like the conversations you referenced with all of the different building owners. Those that aren't necessarily going to trigger the plan development requirements, those are still going to, you're going to lead those, or how is that going to be happening?
We are, and we're asking for help with leading those. So for example, with ComEd, we've had several conversations with them. We did some drawings. Teresa, we talked this weekend and offered to make some phone calls for us. It's kind of it really is one piece at a time. And it depends on the agreement that's arrived at too. If ComEd ultimately says, we'll give you an easement and we don't want anything to do with it, then we would probably go to a different partner like Open Lands or Neighbor Space. You know, and of course, Neighbor Space holds a community play garden, so that's like that's kind of what they do, is they hold public spaces that are maintained by neighbors. And Open Lands has made similar arrangements with other groups, so that's one possibility. There's also a possibility that they just say like, okay, we'll pay them to take down the fence, and that's that. You know, it just depends on how those go, and so that's one of the things that's hard about it, because it's not like the city can just come in and do it. We actually have to work with every single property owner. Some of whom are the city.
Can I just say how much I appreciate the coordination it takes to do all of this, because, you know, we are talking about parcels that are owned by lots of different entities, you know, with, you know, different attitudes towards this project. And I just really appreciate, you know, all the work that has gone into getting us to this point, and, you know, the fact that it's not just a pipe dream. I mean, it's, you know, neighbors coming together and volunteering your time, doing this, getting a lot done, and it's really impressive. And, you know, earlier today, I was walking to the L, and, I saw a young woman on a bike, you know, get, knocked down by a car, right? And so she was right by the Archer, 62 stop, and, you know, was like knocked off her bike, and, you know, fortunately wasn't hurt, but, you know, this is, I think,
Really serious.
one of the consequences of, you know, having to start traveling on your bicycle. And so, you know, this is incredibly valuable. It's something that's going to improve our community. And, you know, we've seen some examples of things that were only possible because neighbors came together. So like play garden, McKinley Park, dog park, you know, those are things that I've seen, you know, that didn't exist, you know, when I first moved to McKinley Park, but exist now because people came together, put in their time, their hearts and souls, and, you know, made it happen. And this is another example of that. So I just really appreciate all, you know, all the effort and coordination you're putting into this, and, you know, everybody's engagement with it, because it's phenomenal. Thank you.
Okay, I think a question. I feel like I'm for this idea, and I love it. And I see you guys kind of stop like by Pinkton Park around there. So it's gonna be like a whole new river walk. Wouldn't it be easier to start from this river walk already in like downtown, like by Wacker, to come this way? Cause that's
So that's happening separate. That's happening separately. Yeah, the city has already said that they're gonna extend the downtown Riverwalk to approximately where the 78 will start. And then the 78 will go all the way to Pinkton Park. And then we'll connect to that. So they're separate projects, but eventually, if everything works out, it would all be connected. All right, thank you so much. The library, I can't believe the library staff has let us go this long. You're welcome to hang out, but just thank you so much for coming. This has been great.